They said it couldn't be done. They said you weren't going to get another episode, PJ, and I proved that. No one said that, actually. Actually, everyone's been really supportive and kind, but here we are, Meet the Tanukis, another episode, and this is a special episode for me because we are talking to someone who is outside of my immediate team for the very first time. So, for those of you who don't know, who are new here, my name is PJ Metz. I'm an education evangelist at GitLab. My job involves providing learning materials and content for people who are just learning to be developers and engineers. Mostly we work with getting free licenses for universities and colleges. But also I just want everyone to be able to know how to use GitLab and to know how it can help them as they're becoming the next generation of amazing developers and amazing engineers that are going to be working on the next generation of software and products. This show is Meet the Tanukis, and I've got this new weird setup where I'm looking right down the barrel of my camera here, but when I want to look at my screen, I gotta look over here. So what if I do like this, and it's a little better, but now I'm like, it's always hard to know where to put your camera, where to have your screen. But these are the type of kinks that are going to get worked out the more I do this amazing show. So Meet the Tanukis is a show about people who work at GitLab, about GitLab team members, and we talk to them about what they do at work, what they did before work, what they do for fun, what their favorite flavor of Mountain Dew Kickstart is, and why it's pineapple, orange, mango, which if you haven't been following me on Twitter, you'll know why this is in my life. So follow me on Twitter to learn more about Mountain Dew Kickstart. So I'm very excited for the show today because, like I said, it's a team member who's not in my immediate team. I'm on what's called the community relations team. We are full of developer evangelists and program managers and education managers and open source people, which we are hiring for open source project managers if you want to come in and be a part of our lovely team. But our team is all about reaching out to the community and finding out what developers need, what they're doing, finding ways for them to learn, to level up, and getting really involved. And today, we are talking to someone who is not only not on my team, but kind of, sort of, really super duper important. So I get a little nervous because I'm talking to someone who is a director of engineering for growth and security and applied machine learning. And this is a very exciting get for us. And he came to us and said, I think your show is interesting. I want to be on it. And said, well, come on through. So everyone, please give a warm welcome. Clap at your computer screens. We can hear you. It's just like Tinkerbell. We need applause to live. Please welcome to our stream, Wayne Haber. I can't believe GitLab gives me money to play a reggae horn for someone as distinguished as you, Wayne. Wayne, welcome to the stream.
Thanks, PJ.
Awesome. So, I talked about myself. I talked about a little bit about me. Why don't you introduce yourself to the people at home?
Sure. So I'm Wayne Haber, one of the directors of engineering at GitLab. And as PJ, as you mentioned, a couple different teams that I'm responsible for. The section or security section that's responsible for the security features of the GitLab product that customers and users use to make sure that the code that they're writing is secure. Then also the growth team, which does growth experiments or growth hacking in the product to connect users with features and with value. It also helps to drive revenue. And then also the model ops team, which has applying machine learning, the various parts of the product to make the product smarter. And then also anti-abuse to protect the product itself from being abused. Kind of related to security, but not exactly the same thing. And I've been at GitLab 2 years and a couple months, and it's been a blast.
That's fantastic. 2 years and a couple months. So that seems like, I feel like 2 years ago was a period of like a lot of growth for GitLab. I know people who were here. My coworker Brendan O'Leary, my teammate, he has been at GitLab for about 4 years, and he was like in the low hundreds. And I feel like our employee count just skyrocketed 2 years ago. So you came at a really exciting time. So one of the things you just said is in the applied machine learning and the model ops, you're talking about like protection, like from like what do you mean, like how are we protecting ourselves, like from like hackers, like what do you mean by that?
So the model ops team is more, there's a couple different areas. There's using machine learning. Like right now we're working on implementing one of the first machine learning specific features in the product itself to recommend reviewers for merge requests, aka pull requests, where they're using patterns identified by the machine learning to find who would be best to review a merge request, which is great in terms of just the developers' morale, and also the time to merge is a really important thing because that's really about the efficiency of the development teams. That's what we're working on first. There's other things coming in the future in that area on the security space, but those plans are still being worked out. On the other sides, we have the anti-abuse team, which looks at abuse of the platform itself, which is in two different areas. The primary focus is spam, where people will put spam into issues, comments, or descriptions, or merge requests, etc., and then which is then viewable online, but also can generate emails to people, which is what spammers are after. And then also abusing the CI features, the continuous integration features, where so continuous integration is about building the code, building and deploying, primarily building the code. Well, you build code with code. And in that code, you can put in crypto miners that mine cryptocurrencies for the benefit of the abusers. And not that cryptocurrency is bad, not at all, but using GitLab's paid for CPU power to do that is not what we want to have happen. So
Right.
It's looking at ways to catch both of those things, both spammers and the crypto mining abusers, while also not impacting legitimate users, where sometimes the systems can figure out exactly what the problem is, or if it's a problem or not, and block it automatically. Sometimes it's definitely okay, and we let it go. And then there's that in between where the line changes as both legitimate users change what they do, where we don't want to block them, and the bad actors also chip away at what we have in there and find ways around it occasionally. And then we look at those things and then find ways to protect against those things.
Yeah, that's exciting. I love both of those ideas. The idea of like knowing who to give a merge request to, because one of the things that I always get worried about when I'm making a merge request and I need to make a change, I'm like, all right, if it's not for my handbook and I'm not sure who I need to give it to, I get really confused at that point. So it's really cool that you're using machine learning to help users find the best possible person. And again, like most machine learning, it's not a we'll just trust the computer and it's always going to be right. It's here's some advice, here's where we think it might be based on previous patterns. But that crypto mining stuff, I remember when that was sort of affecting a lot of CI companies who were having their CPU and their processing power being abused. And again, like cryptocurrency is whatever, but like it's using other people's power to mine. Like that's not great. That's so cool. That's awesome. So like I said, or like you said rather, 2 years at GitLab. What did you do before GitLab? Actually, let's go even farther back. How did you get into tech, and what's the road to becoming a director look like?
It's great. I love talking about those times as well. So I started out where I had some family members that were working on computers when I was in high school, and I started playing video games, and well, this is a lot of fun. And then one of the game systems, there were ways of copying the games, and this is 16K physical cartridges where you had to fake out the hardware. And I wanted to play more games. And I was like, I don't know, 14 at the time. And if you put the cartridge in halfway where the data would be read, but like the protection bit would not be set, like those pins wouldn't be pushed down. This is really old school stuff. Then you could actually read the data off the cartridge. So, and then a family member who's much older than I was said, here's this bit of assembly code that makes you can copy this data over to a tape drive. This is really quite a while ago. That's kind of neat. Maybe I can improve that. I can learn enough assembly language. Is not the best place to start in terms of learning programming. But I did that and I made it a little bit better just by by trial and error and getting it wrong 100 times or 200 times before I got it right. And
That's
then
how I
I started,
program now.
yeah. And then I started. It's really where I got interested in it, and I started learning like basic programming, and then back then C programming, which was a lot of fun. But I was still in high school, and I wanted a job, wanted some extra spending money, and I went into the newspaper. It was at the time, so you did it. Went in the newspaper, looking at job listings, a physical paper, and I thought I'm going to look for C programmer. I mean, I'm 16. I don't know how to look for a job, so I'm looking, and they misfiled the newspaper. A job. Sorry, I was looking for a cashier job.
Oh,
And
interesting.
at the beginning of cashier jobs, there was a C programmer job. I'm like, I can do that. And actually, I applied, and they didn't hire me for that job. It basically made me an intern at a computer company, a software compiler company, and I learned. I had a lot of fun there working on actually the Manx cross compiler, which was a second or third tier company, but was still doing quite well at the time. Company of maybe 40 or 50 people. I did support and worked on a little bit of the code there, which was a lot of fun. Then went to school for computer science.
That was all in high school that you did that?
I was in high school.
Wait, that's fantastic. Okay, tell me what. Yeah, so now university, right?
So university, ended up getting a computer science degree, and really enjoyed that. I learned a lot, both theory and practice. So for example, I learned the theories of data structures and things like that, but also like my favorite class was writing a relational database from scratch. The whole semester was doing that. So it actually had to, interpret the SQLs, store the tables, be able to do joins, and was introduced back then to automated testing as well, where the professor didn't check anything herself. She wrote automated tests to check the code written by the
Yes.
students, which was pretty neat. I still remember working on that.
We are still trying to convince professors in computer science that that's a great way to do it. There's some great, and like I said, I'm on the EDU team. There are some great universities that they don't grade any code anymore. It's all automated testing. So if you're out there and you're like, I have too much grading to do, and you're a computer science professor, like, listen, people are doing it. It's possible. You don't need to use Blackboard or heaven forbid, if some of you are still handwriting code and turning that in, get on the bus. We're waiting for you. So continue. That's really cool. A relational database. That was the whole course, and all automated testing to get your grades. That's awesome. Continue.
Mm-hmm.
This is great.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun back then. And then got my first job, stuck around there for about 2 years. It was kind of a medium to large company, and learned a good bit there as kind of first job kind of things. And then I was in the Midwest, then decided to move to Atlanta, and I interviewed a couple different companies. And this company where it was a number of companies were very traditional, and people would dress up in suits and things like that, or I'd be traveling all the time, which I wasn't necessarily looking forward to that, although that's what I ended up doing. I interviewed at one company. It was a company of like 20 people, and the CEO was wearing shorts to the interview, and I thought that's kind of she's just super casual. Went there, and I was the second developer at the company. It was a company that did software for hospitals, to move data between hospital systems and medical systems.
Yeah.
And did a lot of consulting in that area. I was the second developer to kind of take what the consultants were doing and make it into a product. And I didn't know really what I was doing in terms of organizing projects, but nobody was organizing the work. As we grew the team to 5-6 people, nobody knew what the priorities were. There were no there was no automated builds going on. So I just started doing that and determining what the direction should be, how we should be doing hiring, how we should do architecture. Never thought I'd be good at that side, but I ended up being pretty good at it, and eventually built the team to about 25 people and became the CTO of that small company before it was acquired.
Second developer on and CTO shortly after. That's great. Oh man. Okay, so now you're CTO. Like, where do you go from here, Wayne?
So was there at that company, I think about 5-6 years, and then we were acquired, that company, and stayed at the acquiring company for a while, but their philosophy and mine were a little different. So stayed there for a couple of years, and then till everything was kind of integrated and going well. And then went over to a security company, which was about, when I started, I think it was about 30-40 people. And the CEO of the time said, Wayne, I don't know if we're going to be in business in 6 months. That's how much run rate we have with the investors. So this is a big risk.
Yeah.
And it was just intrusion detection of looking for hacker attacks. I think had about 100 customers, maybe 200 customers, mostly in the Southeast US. And
so security focused though, like that was the whole company's thing. Okay, cool.
Yep, security focused. I took over the development team, which was 5 people at the time, and then built it up over time. Where hired a whole bunch of people. I think we got to about 40 people. Then started acquiring our competitors. So acquired 2 competitors who are around the same size, and then took the role of integrating the best of the technologies.
Okay.
So fast forward from there, about 5 years, we went from 1 office to, in the US only, of course, to, I think 5 years later, 7 years later, I think 9 offices across the world, 900 employees, thousands of customers, cash flow positive, et cetera, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, being cash flow positive is a very nice place to be.
Yes, definitely. And then started integrating those companies, doing architecture work, things like that. Had a portion of the engineering team, and then we were acquired by Dell, which was interesting. And they kept us mostly separate. That's how Dell treated that acquisition, at least. And stayed there for a number of years afterwards. And then Dell actually spun that company off and IPO'd the company. I was able to attend the NASDAQ IPO event, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
It's a TV studio. There's not much really happens there during that, except for the TV, the broadcast, but it was still
right.
Kind of fun. And then left there about 2.5 years ago to come to GitLab.
And then while you were at GitLab, we IPO'd as well. So like very exciting. Oh my gosh, like that idea of like your first job in tech was as a high schooler, you accidentally saw an ad for it. And then after that, you're like, okay, I'm going to seriously pursue this. Earlier, when you were talking about exposing the code of video games, Pyrock came with a comment called hot swapping. And I guess that's the official name for it, is like not quite putting the cartridge all the way in.
Yeah, it was a this thing where, yeah, I think it was called hot swapping at the time, but you'd put the cartridge in like halfway or like 7/8 of the way in,
very gently, like
which like the rightmost pins would say, can you do anything other than just run the code on it? So that when you turn on the game system, it would allow you to read the data, but it wouldn't automatically run it. So you could actually load code from elsewhere.
Yeah.
Which would allow you to download the cartridge.
Yeah, for those of you born after 1999, games used to come on cartridges, and it wasn't just automatically downloaded from the internet. Oh, interesting. So Pyrock with another comment. They wanted to do hot swapping for Banjo-Tooie initially to get the game data from the initial Banjo-Kazooie cartridge. That's, by the way, Banjo-Kazooie, one of the best games of all time. Pyrock and I used to play it all the time as kids. Fantastic stuff. So Wayne, you work at this security company. They get acquired by Dell. That company gets spun off, IPO'd. Then 2 years later, you joined GitLab. What was your initial role at GitLab? What did you do here first?
So I started at GitLab. I had a team of, I think, 2. And GitLab was creating a new stage in the security space that at the time was called Defend, where we had the secure stage, which would scan code as it was developed to look for security issues. And then Defend was created to scan and protect the applications after they were deployed, kind of one pre-deployment, one post-deployment.
Okay.
And had a couple people actually on loan from the secure team, which was great. And then hired, over 6 months, I think about 15 people to build out the Defend stage.
Wow.
And to build out both vulnerability management and dashboards so that the users of GitLab could see what vulnerabilities they had, how they was trending over time, mark them as resolved, mark them as true positives, etc. And then built out the other side of scanning things after they're deployed, such as container scanning Kubernetes containers, both pre-deployment and post-deployment for vulnerabilities.
Okay.
And did that for about 6 months. And then we changed let's see, I've actually, in 2.5 years, I think I've changed 4 times my role in some way. Then I took on the growth team then, in addition to the protect stage. And great team there that already existed to do these experiments on the product to see if we try it this way or that way, do we get more usage from our users? And then do they actually use the features down the line? And then do those features relate to them wanting to buy more, to buy it all or buy more? There's lots of different stages there. And after that, took on the fulfillment team as well, which is about buying and licensing GitLab. That's probably about 6 months to a year later. And then turned over that security side to one of my peers. Things are always changing at GitLab, where there's a lot of consistency there. And then as of maybe about 6 months ago, took on applied machine learning and anti-abuse, a new space, kind of similar to Defend in terms of how it's coded. When I started, one person. It's actually taken an acquisition that GitLab did of a company called Unreview that specialized in machine learning, and then have hired a manager for that team and another 3-4 people and building out those features. And then as of recently, I actually turned over fulfillment over to someone else to focus on it, and I took on the security team again, the things that I built originally, and also the rest of the security team. So
that's gonna be kind of
over time and just a whole lot of fun.
That's gonna be kind of exciting to like leave a team and then come back to it and sort of see where it's progressed to, and see what stuck around and what didn't. But I really want to ask about the experimental stuff and the sort of like what's the name of that group that we just talked about?
Growth, that does growth hacking.
Yeah. Okay. So growth. Can you tell us some of the stuff that like you've experimented on and that has become like a feature that we've kept? Is there anything that you can talk about with that?
Absolutely. So the team does experiments, and a failed experiment is not a bad thing. You've learned something that doesn't work. That's why you do it as an experiment. So an example would be, we thought, we had a theory that if we provide a default README with steps on what to do for new projects, that we'd see more usage of more features in those projects, of different features in GitLab. But we also thought, well, maybe people are just going to ignore these things, delete them, not like them, etc. So, we weren't sure at all. So the growth team built out a default README with steps to follow for a new project and iterated on it a number of times. And then I think we started rolling it out initially to 10% of users, 10% of new projects. And then we wanted to see what is the increase, if there is any, of features like continuous integration, like security scanning, etc. Of do they buy or not as well, in terms of that. And then started seeing an increase of that. So then we rolled it out to more users. I think it went from 10% to 30%. And we saw this the same kind of increase. And I think from there, I think we went quickly to 50% and then 100%. So that's an example of a successful experiment. Another one that we did is sometimes the experiments are more complex like that, like having a new file and new features. Sometimes it's really simple. Like we change the email we send, the format of the email we send when you're in GitLab and you invite another user to your project.
Okay.
We changed it to where it came, instead of from quote unquote GitLab and the from email address, to the name of the user that did the invite. We thought, well, if somebody sees a name they know, they're more likely to click on it. And it turns out it has like a 0.2% or something like that difference in people clicking on those emails when we did it to 10 or 20% of users. So we figured, it actually didn't help much, if at all, not statistically significant. So we didn't roll forward with that as an example.
Both of those seem counterintuitive to me, because like when I get the automatic README that populates, one of the first thing I do is I highlight it all and delete it. But for an email, if it came from someone I know, I feel like I'd be way more likely to open it. That's the reason why you do an experiment. You're like, well, let's try it. Let's see what happens. Because if you just asked me and trusted me, neither of those would have gone well at all, because I don't know what I'm talking about. So that's fantastic. The idea that whole group just gets to sort of like make changes and see what happens, that sounds like an exciting group to be a part of. talk to us more about what's it like to lead a group of experimenters, a bunch of like, I think it's just a room full of like Nikola Teslas and Thomas Edisons that are like, let's change this and see what happens. What's it like leading a group like that?
Yeah, it is really interesting. You have to remember that not a failed experiment is not a bad thing. You've learned something that doesn't work. That's why you do it to a minimal level and a minimal viable change, but you also want to experiment on a percentage of users before you do it with all, to see if it has the desired effect.
Mm-hmm.
The other, it's very, very data intensive. Like, how do you choose what subset of users? How do you interpret the results? So it's not all only, add feature, see if this feature gets used more or less often, or change how this feature is used. Sometimes it's just a textual change, or like even a color change on a page. Sometimes we change this. Maybe it's just a simple change. We change the text here on this page. But then what we want to know is, within 30 days, do they use this other feature and in this way?
Okay.
You have to look at many different steps in the data, and we get so much data on that on usage. It can be really complex to kind of track that through the user process. So that's one part. It's just very different than normal engineering. Not different bad, just different. The other is that we're very data intensive, as I mentioned, and we try to stay away from doing development that's not an experiment, like for other teams, although we do it occasionally, because then it's really easy to just turn into a regular development team and not do experiments. So we do that occasionally. Like the growth team built the what's new feature in GitLab. In the top right, you can see what the new features are. The growth team built that, but it wasn't really an experiment because we were sure we wanted it, because we want to really stay focused on experiments.
Right.
We're really good also at knowing various parts of the product. At GitLab, everyone can contribute. It doesn't mean it's easy to contribute in every single area. So the team gets really good at working in various different areas based on where the experiments are, which is great because it makes us very effective. We're also the first candidates for, hey, we've got this big thing that needs many different people from different groups. So often it's the first team other product managers want to pull from because we can directly contribute, which we do often, but we need to keep an eye on that to make sure we're keeping the balance there.
That's exciting. So one of the things that you brought up was worked in security for a long time, came to GitLab doing security, left for a bit, and now you're back with security. When we're talking about security, you mentioned two different stages. First is secure, where you're securing the code while you're working with it. The other is defend. And to me, that seems like one is very dev, the other is very ops. But since we're DevOps, obviously there's a marriage between the two. Can you talk to us about what it's like working in secure versus defend? Like what was it like being a part of those two different groups?
Yeah, it's great. I like that question a lot. So secure is about, so the security teams at our customers are very involved with both the secure and the protect side. We've renamed defend protect. I didn't mention that, but that's
protect
is a name change. And but protect is basically what defend was. And so the security team is involved with both, the CISO teams, Chief Information Security Officer, and their team. The development teams are definitely involved in the secure side. They create the security issues in the code, not intentionally, of course, hopefully not intentionally, and they're also the ones to resolve them. On the protect side, sometimes it's the developers who can resolve the issues. Sometimes it's the operations team, as you mentioned, ops. And security is very interested in both sides. So it's different data for different people at different times. So, for example, sometimes there are new vulnerabilities found or new ways to exploit code found. So that's on if it's a new way to, often security vulnerabilities in code are introduced by changes in the code. Somebody accidentally doesn't validate input data and then it's vulnerable to cross-site scripting attack, for example. Sometimes it's a library that's changed, that the developer hasn't changed anything, but a new vulnerability has found a new library, like Log4j, which has been in the news lately.
Yeah.
So there's that element of chaos that comes in from the outside. And the developers have to resolve that code. Then there's the challenges when code is deployed, where it could be that a library is updated, one that didn't come from the developers through the dependency chains. It could be just in the operating system or some other third-party software. And that's where the container scanning comes into play, and also operating system configuration And container configuration is really key with scanning the containers to find vulnerabilities, because it might have no vulnerabilities in the code or the dependent libraries. It may be fully patched, but may have a configuration issue that makes it easily exploitable. And scanning for those are important as well. And they change for different reasons. But the bad actors only need to find one way in, and the good actors need to protect against everything that they can and detect everything they can't protect against.
And that's one of the big challenges of security is it only takes one way in for the bad actors to have access to everything. I think I read one time about someone being able to hack into a large system through a Wi-Fi enabled fish tank accessory because it was connected to the Wi-Fi and it wasn't secure, because if you're making an accessory for a fish tank that tells you like the temperature of the water, what are you worried about security for? Well, everyone needs to be worried about security. It's very important. So how do you, if you're constantly knowing that they only need one way in and it's important to protect against all of it, what do you do? How do you stop all these bad actors out there?
So you can't stop them all. You can surely try. That is a great laudable goal. It's about knowing what the risks are, reviewing the risks periodically, and prioritizing resolving them based on both the risk and the negative outcome of that risk. So, like, let's say one risk is a DOS risk. So you can think, well, denial of service risk. So, if we don't resolve this thing and it gets exploited, our systems will not be accessible from the internet for this amount of time. Now, if you're an online marketplace for buying things, that's a really big deal, because downtime equals lost money. If you're a technology company selling software, it's still not great for your reputation, but it's not as impactful. So, or another example might be is thinking about the risk of a vulnerability in terms of not only your confidential data of a company, but also the confidential information of your employees and their privacy. So, what's the impact to your employees if they get phished and their identity is stolen, et cetera. So you kind of look at across many different areas and know what your risks are, know what you are protecting well against and what you're not, and then detecting things that are hard for the attackers to avoid, so that you assume that the bad actors are going to find a way in, or they will find a way in if they have enough time and energy and skills, and they are just as smart as the protectors are in many cases. You can't assume that they're not, because they're on the attacker side. They often are. And detecting them. So looking at things like having really good logs in systems, so that you can, and then looking at patterns in the logs for detecting things, watching network traffic in and out, because often the bad actors need to exfiltrate data out of a network. So looking for those things to catch the exfiltration outbound are key. Catching changes to systems that were expected versus unexpected. And then lastly, having a really good, but the next thing that comes to mind, really good incident response plans. Everybody is going to have a security issue at some point. So doing a tabletop exercise, like if this kind of thing happens, okay, what are we going to do? And who's going to do it and how we do it? Let's actually talk through what we do, how we do the patching, how we do the communications to our customers and the public. I talked to a former colleague who's now at another company, and he said in their response to Log4j, some teams had done these tabletop exercises in advance and kind of had their plan of how are they going to patch, do they know where all their systems are, how do they communicate to their board of directors, how do they communicate to their customers, how do they communicate to the public, etc. Some teams had that, and their plans did not survive first contact with reality, but at least they had them to base on. Other teams didn't, and were in complete chaos. And the ones that planned for it, so having those incident response plans are really important.
And that's really like a real world example outside of tech of where we spend a lot of time being prepared for things. I mean, like I said, I was a former high school teacher. There were times where we were doing fire drills twice a month and no fire ever came. But if it did, we were ready. And so we need to make sure we're treating software and development, all of this, the same way we treat what we would consider real world issues. But I mean, as much as software is involved in our lives now, it's all real world issues, really. but that exercises and having a plan. And like you said, the plan might fall apart as soon as it comes up against the actual example, but you've got this blueprint that you can use, and you usually know what the next step is. Yeah, that's fantastic. Um, Man, we can start wrapping up. This is all such amazing information. Your team, like what's going on in your team now? What's the new? What's the news? What's happening with people under you as director?
The really excited about a number of features. I mentioned the merge request recommender, reviewer recommender is coming soon. Powered by machine learning. We're recruiting beta customers right now to be early users of it, so we can get feedback on it. We are also got all sorts of features coming on the growth team, all sorts of different experiments, and it's really exciting. We're looking at so we can do more experiments over time per engineer or per team per month, per engineer per team per month. So we're looking at ways to kind of take the common things out and refactor them, so we're not rebuilding them each time, like selecting. It's too hard today to select which users are going to be in which experiments when we're doing 10%, 20%, et cetera. So we're looking to refactor that out. And then on the security side, we've got all sorts of features coming on scanning code and scanning infrastructure better and more efficiently for finding issues, both to have a lower false positive rate of where we say there's an issue and there isn't, and when a false negative rate, when we miss something and there's something there. There's a couple of different projects that the vulnerability research team has been working on a while that we're working to productionize. One is called Browserker, which is a cool name.
I love that name.
Yeah, I don't know who named it, but kudos to them. That does a better job of scanning web applications for security vulnerabilities from the outside. So it basically browses to the web application as if it was a user with a browser, and then pings away at it in all sorts of different ways to find all the portion of the application, whether the developer intended them to be available or not, and then tries them for various security vulnerabilities like cross-site scripting, like XML entity injection, like SQL injection, et cetera, to find those things more accurately.
That's very exciting. And I know that we talked about how when you came to GitLab, it was a period of great growth. Are your teams growing? If there's anyone who's interested, are there some positions available?
Absolutely, yeah. There are positions, I think, on just about every team that I'm responsible for. So we're looking for primarily Ruby on Rails developers. We're also looking for front-end skills, and not all. Like the growth team looks for people that have both back-end skills and enough front-end to be dangerous. And then the applied machine learning team is actually right now looking for the same, to integrate the applied machine learning features and anti-abuse features into the product. And also looking for Python developers who have a machine learning background. A little bit unique for GitLab. We don't have that many of those yet, but Python's the primary language for machine learning. And then the security side is primarily back-end engineers in Ruby on Rails who also may not know security, although it'd be great if they do, but have an interest in learning security if they don't, to work on those secure scanners.
Absolutely. Oh, that's very exciting. So, y'all, there are jobs available. Ruby on Rails, front-end, back-end, Python, machine learning, tons of stuff available out there. Wayne, any last words, last thoughts, advice for the people, whether it's people who are looking to apply or people who are currently working or people in security, anything you want to leave the people with before we head out of here?
What I'd say is do a practice run before doing a technical test with a peer of yours. Looking at what kind of questions you might get asked. Like, we don't do an online real-time coding test. We don't find that super effective, although many companies do, and that's fine. What we do is we give you some example code and say, enhance it in this way, find the problems with it and fix them, submit those changes to us, and the interview is actually discussing them, not doing the change live. And so it's always worth practicing those things so you're not nervous, and to see if your skills are where you feel they should be. The other is read the handbook. Read the handbook before you interview, for the team, for the department, et cetera. You can get so much information about how we interview, what things we look for, so you can not game the system, but think about things in advance on the kinds of questions we might ask, so that you can know what's going on and know what kinds of things we look for so you can come up with examples. Those are the things I'd consider.
Absolutely. And like the handbook is a treasure trove of information. Even if you're not interviewing with GitLab and you want to see how GitLab does something so you can bring it to your own team, the handbook is available. All right. It is available for everyone. We believe in transparency and we want what we do to be available for all of y'all. Listen, Wayne, this has been such a great show. You have been such an amazing guest. Thank you so much for coming on. And we will see you around. I'm just excited to get to know you more and just as a team member. So, everyone, thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. This will be available on the Unfiltered GitLab channel after this. So if you're watching that now, check out the links below. We got great stuff there, and we'll see y'all later.
Cheers. Have a great one, PJ.